Welcome to the newly launched IRCICA podcast channel. My name is Mariam Al-Khassaune. I'll be your host. And we will begin with our first series about Islamic architectural heritage. This series of podcast conversations is a subset of a broader ongoing series of live talks entitled the IRCICA HeritageTalks, which was recently launched by IRCICA's Architectural Heritage section. It's a series of monthly lectures that take place in our headquarters in Istanbul. Every month, a specialist in architectural cultural heritage will be invited to give a lecture about a specific topic related to Islamic architectural history, design, and philosophy. It's an opportunity for them to discuss their areas of interest and for us to learn about a diverse range of topics, including meaning in Islamic architecture, practices of heritage conservation, and Islamic design. In this podcast series, we sit down with the visiting lecturers one-on-one to get a general overview of their work and areas of speciality. In this second episode, Mr. Taha Özdemir, a specialist in conservation and preservation at IRCICA, sat down with our guest professor, Dr. Zeynep Gül Ünal, who's a member of the Faculty of Architecture at Yıldız Technical University and the director of the Application and Research Center for Preservation of Historical Heritage of YTU. She works on the preservation of cultural heritage assets, information technologies, and risk management for protection of cultural heritage against natural disasters and new generation warfare. Professor Ünal is also the Vice President of ICOMOS, which is the International Council on Monuments and Sites. In this episode, Professor Ünal talks to us about the concept of hybrid warfare. She explains to us how this modern approach to warfare can threaten cultural heritage and what can be done to protect and prevent the loss of cultural heritage. She also discusses migration and its impact on preserving cultural memory and the intervention of international organizations in safeguarding cultural heritage. The talk begins here.
We have started Cultural Heritage Talks. And this is going to be the second podcast program, second interview. Professor Dr. Zeynep Gül Ünal from Yıldız Technical University, and she is also Vice President of the ICOMOS and ICORP, its scientific committee, and she has been working on the cultural heritage protection, armed conflict, risk preparedness, and so on. Welcome, Professor, again.
Thank you, Taha. Thank you for the very kind and short introduction. It's hard to put all the things together at the same time. So,
Professor, I want to start with a conversation with a question, because I know you have been related with IRCICA for many years. It was, I think, from beginning of 90s and maybe before, when you were a student and young expert. At that time, it was like beginning of this Yugoslavian war, Bosnian war, and many other conflict areas, because 90s is unfortunately its starting point of our maybe modern conflicts. So I want to ask, beginning with one question, that how did you meet with IRCICA and how did you start working on the protection of endangered cultural heritage?
Oh, I need to date back, I think, 1990s. Actually, you know that the Yıldız Technical University and the IRCICA is a neighbor organization. As a technically, we were settling next to each other at the part of the Yıldız Palace. And yes, I think it was 1992 and 1993, between 1992 and 1993. As you know that our dear Professor Amir Pasic during the Bosnian War was working in the IRCICA. Yeah. At the same time, he had a part-time lecturer position in the Restoration Master Program at Yıldız Technical University. That time I was research assistant at the same department, and I assigned to assist the Professor Pasic in his lecture. This is how it started. Later, upon the invitation of the Professor Pasic, I joined the Mostar 2004 project team run by IRCICA Architecture Department. I think that was one established department. I think this project continued between 1992 and 2004. It was a very important project that involved documenting the destruction of the war on the cultural heritage and planning the post-traumatic recovery process. Even like we had some break and continued to work together, and we worked together till 2015 for the project Al-Quds Jerusalem. We were together again. And during that time, I have seen that IRCICA did an exemplary work in terms of both content and the timing for the protection and rehabilitation of cultural heritage, especially during the Bosnian War. In many crisis intervention and this kind of studies, I have been involved all the years of destructive wars of war. This was one of the example work, I think. This war also the one of the first example of a new generation war, or we call today the hybrid warfare, in which the destruction of cultural heritage is an important tool of the war. And these projects have also had a guiding effect on my academic path too. That was important for my personal career. I would like also to take this opportunity to commemorate Amir once again with gratitude and respect.
Yes, I also closely working with Amir Pasic, and his loss has affected us very deeply because his contribution, as you also stated, on the Balkan heritage and also in Jerusalem and Samarkand, he was very active. Okay, well, yes, you have mentioned the hybrid threats and the new warfare, because I think, unfortunately, with new war between Ukraine and Russia, and before also, there are many armed conflicts in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, in many continents and many regions. I want to ask, what are the hybrid threats to the cultural heritage, and what kind of problems do these threats create in the protection of cultural heritage? Can you explain us?
I will try. Actually, this is a tough subject. As you all know, that this hybrid warfare is very popular right now. This term has become one of the biggest threats to cultural heritage in the turning point from 20th century to 21st century. And this new generation warfare is a complex military strategy that employs a combination of conventional and unconventional means of warfare. And where the cultural heritage take place in here, targeting the cultural heritage is an integral part of hybrid warfare strategies. Like every asset of the cultural heritage, tangible or intangible, which is valued by the society as a part of its common identity and collective memory, is both the means and the target of this warfare. And also the technological tools is important. These technological tools of this new warfare not only blur the lines in the battlefield between the safe zone, conflict zone, and the counter territory, but also extend the battlefield of cyberspace that has no physical boundaries. That's another problem for us. And also the manipulating the crowds via social media, misinformation, or cyber attacks that target the digitalized collective memories are only some examples of how technology can be used for giving damage to the cultural heritage in this kind of hybrid warfare.
Okay, and in this junction point, you mentioned conventional war, unconventional war. Yes, it's maybe started with First World War I, and it continued with World War II. This huge destruction on the cultural heritage, our memory, cultural identity, and so on. But now we have a different picture. We have, as you also mentioned, different modern tools. Maybe it's going some other warfares with cyber attacks and other so on. And when we look at the historical process within the, of course, scope of the cultural heritage, how you see the difference between the past threats and the present threats? Can you compare briefly?
I will try. Actually, of course, when we call the hybrid threats, the nature of these threats today is not limited to wars. And we have seen that global effect of disaster affects every aspect of life, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. The effect of distress trigger each other, cause rapidly developing events or case, or let's call disaster sometimes. It's change from small size to bigger size. And these gray zones, we call gray zones because it's not easy to identify the link between the problem and the result. These gray zones form the environment, make it difficult to perceive the threat to cultural heritage. And this new generation threats affect both tangible and intangible heritage, not only heritage buildings, but communities and their activities together for centuries are interrupted in the past, during the COVID. For cultural heritage sites or communities, we define this time as a hit time or shut time. The most important step in controlling these cities, structures, and communities that make up the cultural heritage against the destruction, accurate calculation of the threats, hazards, risks, and losses. Cities are shut when the risk calculations are not done or the equation is not set up correctly. It can be a war or any natural disaster, earthquake or flood. Because being shut in some way, it happens when you can't recognize, perceive, and care about the threat, don't take adequate precautions, or mechanism you hope to protect don't come into play. Yeah. And in order to regain control, we need to fast forward the film and then to see the effect of the demolition, damage, destruction of cultural heritage and their users. Then I can understood the effect. And considering the point what weapon technologies have reached today, is not difficult to estimate the destructive power of weapons, both the built environment and the natural environment, and also the community people. And these objectives may also change depending on the aims of the parties of the war. And only the strategic infrastructures of the cities, transportation networks, production centers may not be targeted. Physical damage alone may not be good enough for the aim of the war. Monuments, archives, and the museums, which are the three-dimensional documents of the collective memories that define their culture, are also selected as a target in order to destroy the past of the targeted society and trace of the existence in their lands. And we know that according to United Nations reports, by 2050, 68% of the world's population will live in the cities. And this number is currently 55. It means that the most future wars will take place in the cities and its close vicinities. It means that the cultural heritage also probably will affect directly.
This is very striking numbers that you have given now. Also, I know that about posing the threats, about the mitigation of the threats. If one threat is changing your daily routine and you cannot overcome it yourself, and it's becoming catastrophic thing, and it's that making your life disabled of your daily routine. And these threats is unfortunately is making way to the migration and the other also like social, this displacements and other things. And also I have in my table another statistic that the United Nations 2022 migration report. 3.6% of the world's population is now immigrants, unfortunately. And I wonder what kind of danger does this pose in terms of threats to cultural identity, cultural memory, and intangible cultural heritage, because these risks and these armed conflicts and other like flooding, earthquake is also affecting this intangible heritage.
Yeah, it's a good question actually, because all tangible aspects have a link to intangible one. And as we all know that the communities create the culture. what holds society, community together is the culture of living together.
Yeah.
The different from tradition to produce our cultural heritage with the definition we use today. With the breaking of this connection, societies lose their ability to live together.
Yeah.
The ability to live together is important. It's the power that enables these societies to continue their existing in their long journey. If they lose this connection, they merge into a new society or perish. This also has destroyed the diversity of the societies. Societies are alienated from the environment that they live in, cannot have a tradition or protecting that environment. This results not only the destruction of the old in the past, it's also the inability to create the new correctly. I think that's the link that we need to protect, otherwise we will lose.
Yeah, because if nations cannot stand on it, then the culture is like meaningless, becoming meaningless, because the people itself is like creating culture and cultural heritage that is linked with intangible and tangible heritage. Professor, you have been a part of international organization for so long, and how do you see these international organizations, the contributions of them to the endangered cultural heritage? Do you think is it sufficient, or are there anything that we should upgrade on this topic?
That's another tricky and good question. Yeah, it's never sufficient, of course, our efforts. Okay, actually the existence of international organizations is important in terms of determining the common strategies by bringing together the technical, scientific and financial capacities of different countries or organizations. They have the power to unity. This is particularly important to support communities that cannot produce these resources alone by themselves. And there is an important point to note here. A right-based approach should be adopted in international organizations, and a balance of equal representation should be achieved for all member communities or beneficiaries. Today, in terms of the protection of cultural heritage, many organizations like intergovernmental organizations or the NGOs like UNESCO, ICOMOS, ICROM, IRCICA are trying to carry out these activities as defined in their establishment purpose. But also we need to be open ourselves to understanding the new threats, and we need to reposition our strategies again for fighting this kind of gray zones.
Professor, I think we have come to the end of our time for this very fruitful interview. Thank you for your time, and I think who is going to listen this interview, this podcast, is raise awareness on their mind to protect cultural heritage, intangible, whether tangible. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Please write to us with any comments or questions.